Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show. The medical marijuana for you and me. Ah, yeah, the medical marijuana. Whoa, 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 ah, yeah, the medical. It's the medical marijuana show. You will know.
I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you. Hey, boy, don't feel my world untrue. Yeah, I want to talk to you. My world can be true if you do what I tell you to. I want to talk to you.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Medical Marijuana Radio. This one is for Saturday, the 3rd of December, 2016. I'm your host, Larry Love. We're here every week to bring you all the information on medical cannabis and adult use cannabis from all over the globe. This week, I was fortunate enough to get a tape from Tim at Organtica of the Reverend Kymron DeCesare from Steep Hill Labs. And I picked a little part of that tape to play today, very educational, about terpenes. And we'll be playing that in the second half of the show. But first, before the news, I just want to tell you a little story. It's about, seizing the day. I'll give you a little history first. Back in around 2010, when there were very few, maybe 4 dispensaries here in New Mexico, I was reading the newspaper, and it said that Governor Richardson would see people in his office for like 5 minutes. He used to do that twice a year. So I've been very much an advocate for the program here, and it needed some help. So I went there, and I spoke with the governor at that time. Told him that thank you for pushing this program, but we need more growers and dispensaries and so forth. And he put me together with his chief of staff. I believe I kicked it in the ass a little bit and got it moving. They did approve a bunch of new LNPPs, weeks after that, actually. But bringing us up to 2016, that's about 6 years later than what I was just saying. I was walking out of a pharmacy here in Santa Fe the other day, and as I walked out, Governor Susana Martinez was walking in, and I wasn't thinking much about anything, but I said, hello, Susana, and she said hi and smiled. I got into my car, I sat down in my car, and I said, this is an opportunity. I got out of the car, I went back into the pharmacy, and I said, excuse me, Governor, do you have a moment? I'd like to speak with you about legalization of cannabis here in New Mexico. And she was very nice and extended her hand, and we shook hands. And I said to her, you could be a real hero if in this session coming up in 2017, you could help legalize cannabis for adult use. The state really needs it. The money coming in would just fix education, would fix everything. Well, she says, I'm a little bit concerned about what the climate is like with the new administration, meaning the Trump administration. So I said, well, the science is here now. Besides that, the genie is out of the bottle. So many states, including Washington, D.C., where all of our laws are made, has adult recreational use. And President-elect Trump said he was for states' rights. She said, well, I'm a former prosecutor. So she gave me that, she's in the old school. I said, Governor, the science is here now. If you're worried about kids getting a hold of cannabis, parents have to be responsible, just like they are for their medication cabinet. or the liquor cabinet. It needs to be responsible by the patients. And she said, well, I understand about the medical because she said she had a friend who was going through something, and she understands the oil. And so she does get that, and I was very happy to hear about that. So once again, I said to her, think hard about this. This would really help our state. And again, Governor, you could be a real hero and generate great money that would change the education and everything that we're lacking in New Mexico. So I said, please think hard about it. And she said, I will. And it was a very pleasant conversation. I've been very critical of her in the past, but you know what? I planted a seed. Let's hope it grows. I want everybody to call their representatives when the session starts and tell them that you are for legalization of cannabis. Okay, now some news. I got news for you, as always. And we're going to talk about terpenes. This is from herb.co. That's for Colorado, I think. Maybe not. One of the most wonderful things about cannabis is how different strains vary in their aroma. Being the most common terpene in cannabis, myrcene produces what is the most stereotypical and common smell from the kind herb. Strains are dominated by this terpene, produce earthy, balsamic, spicy, and clove-like odors. If your herb smells like dirt, it may be because it's full of myrcene. Myrcene is the most abundant terpene in cannabis. According to a 1997 study conducted in Switzerland, it sometimes composes up to 50% of the terpene volume in cannabis. It also has been found to aid in the formation of other important terpenes. In 2007 study at the University of Jordan, it found that myrcene, in tandem with other terpene, fights the symptoms of diabetes. 1 year later, a study by GW Pharmaceuticals investigated how it is effective as an analgesic, or pain reliever. The research found that terpene's medical efficacy is similar to that of opium, only without the addiction. A 2011 study published in the British Journal of Pharmacology called Taming THC, Potential Cannabis Synergy and Phytocannabinoid Terpenoid and Entourage Effects, found that myrcene to have a medical efficacy typically considered to be delivered only by cannabinoids. The study discovered that the most common terpene in cannabis relaxes muscles in mice. In addition, this study found that it acts as a sleep aid if consumed in high doses. The study went on to find that it has specific efficacy when paired with particular cannabinoids. For example, myrcene and CBD decreases inflammation, reduces pain, and even fights cancer. When combined with THC, myrcene results in pain reduction, muscle relaxation, and in high enough doses can act as a hypnotic sedative. When combined with the cannabinoid CBG, this powerful terpene fights cancer. According to Steep Hill Labs in Berkeley, California, if it's the percentage as measured by weight and volume of myrcene in a particular strain of cannabis that determines if it is a sativa or indica. According to them, if a sample has over 0.5% myrcene, it will have indica or couch lock effects. If a sample has less than 0.5%, it will have the soaring sativa effect. This is one reason so many sativa-dominant strains of cannabis emit a fruity or floral aroma. It is the presence of other terpenes like limonene that produces a small citrus or fruit. Obviously, myrcene is in mangoes as well. Why mangoes help your high? There has for decades been an urban legend that eating a mango before smoking herb enhances its psychoactive effect. This is actually true. It's because myrcene, which is available in high concentrations in mangoes, helps THC molecules reach specialized receptors in the brain. Thus, eating a mango about 45 minutes before smoking cannabis to allow the myrcene to be digested and reach the bloodstream will stretch your precious cannabis dollars further by enhancing your high. Excuse me. So we're going to be listening to the Reverend Dr. Kymron DeCesare from Steep Hill Labs in a little while after I play some news. PBS is always covering the cannabis scene, and I've got a couple of clips from them. It was a long one, so I have two short ones. This is PBS about what is going to happen with the new Trump administration in regards to cannabis.
Administration could come and undo that memo in an instant. Do you think that we're going to see that? I mean, what do you imagine when Trump takes over that administration is going to do with regards to marijuana?
President-elect Trump has voiced some interest in keeping the status quo when it comes to medical marijuana. His words around recreational marijuana have been less firm. So I think right now we don't know for sure what Donald Trump will do on marijuana. I think that's true on a lot of policy areas, but it's true with marijuana. I think his attorney general pick is one that worries industry. He is a vowed prohibitionist.
This is Jeff Sessions.
Jeff Sessions from Alabama. He's someone who has injected subjective judgment onto not just marijuana, but the marijuana user. So I think however much leash that Donald Trump gives his attorney general will determine whether the Obama doctrine on marijuana holds the day or whether we see a real transformation back to years past.
Taylor, as John points out, Jeff Sessions, who likely will be the attorney general, has been very clear that he does not like what states all over the country are doing with regards to recreational marijuana. Does your industry worry that come January, you might all of a sudden face federal enforcement?
It's certainly something that we're keeping an eye on. The fact is that during the campaign, as John mentioned, President-elect Trump said on multiple occasions that he really did see this as a state issue and that programs in the states that have been chosen by the voters should be allowed to move forward. Certainly, Senator Sessions has expressed his personal opinion on issues around marijuana, but the reality is that Senator Sessions has also, on many occasions, been a strong advocate of state sovereignty and the concept of federalism. So I think there really is a nexus of agreement there on the idea that a program chosen by the voters of the state, working in the way that it's meant to, ought to be respected. Now, as John said, there's still some uncertainty about exactly which direction any of these policies will go, but we do see that sort of path forward.
John, let's take Taylor's point. Let's assume that the federal government does not interfere. Aren't we still going to see conflict, though, between federal law and state law? I mean, there are still other problems. I mean, banks, for instance, can't take marijuana money, and that causes a huge problem for the industry. I mean, those things have got to get worked out eventually, right?
The reforms that have happened during the Obama administration have allowed the industry to really get up and running and have cover, feel safe, that what they are going to do will be protected from federal intervention. But at the same time, the Cole memos, which have really taken this enforcement discretion to a formal stance from the Obama administration policy, does create these unintended consequences around taxes, around banking, around interstate access, around a variety of issues that can be very challenging for the industry. Those are going to need to be addressed eventually. We just don't know when that will happen.
And then they went on to talk about legalization that passed in California a couple weeks ago during the election. And this little clip is about what I feel is the best part of legalizing cannabis, and that's getting people out of jail and not putting people in jail. Here's this little clip.
John, last question for you. What happens on the legal front if people are now have a criminal record because of marijuana sales or possession, or are in prison for marijuana sales or possession? Do these legalization schemes have any say in that? Does anyone get their record expunged or looked at again?
Some of the legalization efforts have put these issues at the forefront. California, for instance, built into its initiative the ability of individuals who were arrested and charged with low-level marijuana offenses, effectively what were formerly offenses that would now be considered legal in California, to go to court and ask for their record to be expunged. Now, those are very specific circumstances. They obviously couldn't be done in conjunction with violent crimes or larger crimes, but these are issues that affect particularly communities of color and create barriers to economic opportunity, barriers to educational opportunity, and have really long-term effects on an individual who faces criminal justice through this process. And so some states have really spearheaded the ability to do this, but as more states have come online, that conversation has broadened, and these criminal justice reform issues have become not dominant, but at least pushed to the front of the line in terms of the issues that are talked about. And I think that's a very important part of this.
All right, John Hudak and Taylor West, thank you both very much for being here.
Thank you.
Again, that's from pbs.org. If you want to see the whole interview, you can check that out. Moving over to New York State, they are adding a condition to their program, which is going to help a lot of people.
The state health department announced today that it is going to start allowing people who suffer from chronic pain to use medical marijuana. Since the state's medical marijuana program began back in January, more than 10,000 patients have been certified to use it. While chronic pain will be added to the list of conditions that qualify for medical marijuana use, the details of the plan have not been worked out yet. But tonight, we're getting answers from medical experts who say it's a step in the right direction.
Dr. Laszlo Metzler with Dent Neurologic Institute says 100 million people in the U.S. have medically chronic pain, which is defined as pain for more than 15 days a month. He says medical marijuana will help get many patients off of prescription opiates.
I'd rather have individuals on medical marijuana than I do with opiates. There has not been one certified death from overdose of medical marijuana. I think this is a exciting time for medical marijuana to step in, to decrease the addiction rate, to decrease the overdose, and help our patients and our athletes and our students who have chronic pain.
Since it's a new program in New York, many of you still have questions about medical marijuana, so I took them to Dr. Metzler. Joe has back issues but doesn't take anything for pain and is wondering how medical marijuana works.
There are CB1 receptors in the brain, more CB1 receptors than any other receptor in the body. And the assumption is that medical marijuana, through THC and some CBD, which are the two main components of medical marijuana, affected at the CB1 level.
But this was the most common issue you brought up, cost. Debbie has had chronic pain since 1991 but can't afford to try medical marijuana. Dr. Metzler says he'd like the government to allow more research so insurance companies will start covering medical marijuana for more people.
There's no insurance company that's going to pay for something because historically it worked. We have to prove it. For that, the federal government will need to switch it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2.
Are you hopeful that in the new administration that's coming in that will happen?
No, I'm not.
Now, the state only said today that the amendment to the program will be published shortly for public comment, and that public comment period has to be 45 days. So Dr. Metzler says he expects chronic pain patients to start seeing him to get medical marijuana prescriptions sometime in January.
Again, that should help a lot of people in New York. And moving over to Minnesota, they are adding PTSD. Now, New Mexico was the first state to add PTSD as a qualifying condition, and here goes Minnesota. This is fantastic.
Thousands more Minnesotans may soon be eligible for medical marijuana. That after the State Department of Health announced this week they'll expand the program next August to include PTSD as a qualifying condition. Josh Rosenthal joins us to explain how that decision could impact the state's medical marijuana program. Josh.
Yeah, Kevin, I had wide-ranging conversations today with the CEOs of both of Minnesota's medical marijuana companies. What's apparent is they both think prices could drop, not only because of an expanding patient pool, but also, as one of the CEOs told me, because of President Trump. It's been one of the big complaints from medical marijuana patients.
I would have to spend anywhere from $2,500 to $4,000 every month. None of that's covered by insurance.
But soon, prices could drop. Dr. Kyle Kingsley, CEO of Minnesota Medical Solutions, says that with an expanding pool of patients, he believes prices could be reduced by 20 to 30% for certain medications within the next few months. Dr. Andrew Bachman of Leafline Labs said he couldn't predict specifics, but if his company can reduce cost, he said it will.
Certainly, as economies of scale are available to us, we will pay them forward. We're a physician-founded organization focused on one thing only, and that's patients and caring for them exceptionally well with compassion and dignity.
Still, medical marijuana remains illegal according to federal law, given that several high-profile members of the incoming Trump administration, including Vice President-elect Mike Pence, have spoken out against it. I asked if Kingsley was concerned.
We're actually fairly bullish on the Trump presidency. We think that he's a pragmatist, and not only that, but he's very pro-business. He supports states' rights, and he's anti-tax. And there's few scenarios where the federal government more harshly treats a business or states' rights, I would argue, than with medical cannabis.
A couple other people I spoke with today who offered some interesting perspectives. One is Jeremy Sankey. He's a member of Minnesota Veterans for Cannabis. He echoed those concerns over cost, telling me he knows vets who'd have to pay between $800 and $1,000 per month to get medical marijuana legally, whereas they could pay $150 to $200 on the black market. Keep in mind, many of these vets are on fixed income, so that is a very, very big difference. Also today, I spoke with Heather Tidd, who's a member of the state task force that recommended PTSD be added to the list of qualifying conditions. She's also the mother of 2 adopted children, one you see here with the CEO of Leafline. She says the kids, suffer from PTSD as a result of past abuse. She told me she thinks medical marijuana has the potential to help a lot of children and young adults who are in similar positions, and those are folks a lot of us just may not think of.
Yes, again, kids also get PTSD for many, many reasons, so this is a good thing. Before we take a short little break and come back with a little talk that Dr. Kymron DeCesare from Steep Hill Labs talked about terpenes and a lot of things. Here's a sort of a really stupid situation where a gentleman who was banking at a bank in Illinois was turned away, and they wouldn't let him have a signature card and use their bank because he's a medical cannabis patient, not working in the business. Anyway, here's this. It's ridiculous.
Metro East man says he's been banned from his bank because he's a legal medical marijuana user. Only on News 4, our Alexis Zotos is questioning the bank tonight to find out what happened.
I am pretty healthy with stage 3 multiple sclerosis and terminal lung cancer.
Darren Stephen Miller was one of the first patients in the Metro East to legally buy medical marijuana under the state's program.
I'm a legal patient of Illinois and have earned the right through my doctors and through what I've been through to get access to this legal medicine.
But on Monday, he says he was stopped by the manager at the Bank of Edwardsville.
And when I walked in the bank, he pulled me aside and said because of my cannabis use, that I could not have a signature card with their bank.
Right now, there are about 12,000 people just like Miller who have state approval to buy medical marijuana at one of the 46 dispensaries around the state.
Or now they got to check every other person at the bank to see if they also are a legal cannabis patient and then stop doing business with them also.
A spokesperson for the bank issued a statement saying the problem was that Miller listed his occupation as a marijuana activist. And the bank passed a resolution saying that as a federally regulated institution and because of the disconnect between federal and state law and regulatory requirements, the bank will not engage in banking relationships with the medical marijuana industry at this time. But Miller doesn't work in the industry. The checking account was for his role as a treasurer position at the Masonic Lodge in Granite City.
Well, this is between me and my doctor, shouldn't be between me and my bank.
The bank refused to clarify why this resolution would apply to a bank account for a 501c3 that has nothing to do with money from the marijuana industry. In Granite City, Alexis Zotos, News 4.
So the bullshit detector goes off there for sure. That's really despicable, and I think that people should boycott Metro East Bank in Illinois. Okay, we'll be right back in just a second. We're not going to take a big break with Dr. Kymron DeCesare, the Reverend Dr.
It's all about the 420 MMJ Radio. The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana radio. Radio show.
Hi, this is Anthony Franjosi from the Honest Marijuana Company, and you're listening to Medical Marijuana Radio.
Okay, and so we are back, and now I'm going to play this clip where Dr. Kymron DeCesare, the Reverend Doctor from Steep Hill Labs, was talking to a group of people here in New Mexico in regards to all kinds of technical stuff. But this is about terpenes, and also do a little bit about e-pens at the end. So I found this to be very interesting. I want to thank Tim from Organtica for getting me this clip and allowing us to use it. So here is the Reverend Dr. Kymron.
With what we're going to be doing here, having a facility and growing medical cannabis for New Mexico.
That's Tim.
What can we do to enhance terpene production in our plants?
So,
and with that,
okay,
what is your thoughts on the reintroduction of terpenes? Because I see all of that going on now, and I'm not sure about that.
Okay, so another broad topic. It'll have a lot of informative stuff in it. Let's get started with that one. So, to start with, let's talk about terpenes, the plant. Okay, the plant has a chemotype. Based on genetics, it has a chemotype that's expressed. This is the ratio of all the terpenoids. And by the way, definition, cannabinoids are a subset of terpenoids. I don't use the word cannabinoid, I use the word terpenoid. Because cannabinoids do nothing special. They're just acting like terpenoids. Every property they have, they're just acting like terpenoids. So rather than you myopically saying, I'm going to learn about cannabinoids, since we have to teach you about terpenes, let's just talk about the whole topic.
Sure.
That way you learn the general rules that you apply to all of them, no matter which terpenoid you run into.
Sure.
Isn't that simpler? Yes. The way it should be done, okay? So, the plant has a chemotype. And if you had absolutely ideal conditions environmentally, you would get that chemotype expressed in a very specific ratio of everything that's in there, with the maximum amounts of those chemicals that are going to be in there of each one of those things. Now, that's impossible to hit. That's an ideal situation in an ideal universe. So what it comes down to is every single one of you, depending on your business model and your vision, you dictate different ways of growing, different ways of extracting, different ways of compounding, different formulations based on your model and your vision, which is exactly what you need to do. That's boutique versus sterile big corp. And if you don't follow your model and do it non-big corp, you shoot yourself in the foot, because then you're competing with them. So, depending on what micronutrients you use, lighting, your room, everything, there's going to be variations in this. Each grower is going to be different. However, the overall, assuming 10 different growers who all become expert horticulturists in terms of the way they grow it, they'll have slight variations. I don't care one little bit. And the reason is that you're all under a misconception that you're trying to find the exact perfect strain for a specific disease. It'll never happen. There's something called the 85-85 rule in medicine. Very few people apply it anymore. I always do because I was a hospital coroner. Greatest good for the greatest number. We're in the Marines. When I design what I consider a general population med, I'm applying the 85-85 rule. That means that if I got 100 people with a particular illness and I give it to all 100 of them, 85% of them are going to get relief, and 85% of them are going to get 85% of relief, or they're going to get 85% relief where 85% of pain is gone or whatever. So it works well for 85% of people, right? Now that I've taken care of the majority, so that I can put them on hold for a while because they're doing much better, then that 15%, whose biodiversity acts very differently, that now I have much more time to spend on a much more focused medicine for them to find out what's right for them.
Sure.
Okay? Once I get done with them, I now have time to go back to the 85 and say, is there a way for me to improve that med? By the way, if you want the 85-85 indica that you start with, it's always Granddaddy Purple. That's the one that fits that bill in indica. It's not great at anything, but 85% of people you give it to who need an indica type effect medically works. Okay, so that's one of those ones that you always want in your garden. Okay, or something similar. Okay, so the 85-85 rule. Now, the likelihood that any given plant on this planet has exactly the right chemical composition, so it would be the perfect medicine for a specific disease, will never happen. The closest you get is the 85-85 rule. After that, if you want to take that same medicine and you want to make it better, you're going to have to start introducing other things into it, right? Because you have to add whatever it doesn't have. Maybe it's almost right, but maybe the alpha-pinene in that flower is half of what you need. So you have to add more, okay? So I rarely have something simple like an herbalist with one plant or one or two plants. I mix several plants together, or I mix several essential oils together. You never see my cannabis essential oil by itself because it doesn't work as well as when I add other things. Finally, above and beyond, like any good pharmaceutical scientist or pharmacological scientist would, if when I'm done blending the easy stuff together that's in mass batches like chamomile oil with cannabis oil, if when I test that and I find that the limonene is still way too low, now I'm adding individual terpenes to bring that up to what I want. Okay?
Adding them back in.
Adding them back in to get the exact thing to make a medicine that's correct, the drug that's correct for that treatment. That's what scientifically in this universe is always going to be required, right? The plant is not growing the way it's growing for a human disease. It's never going to do it. But there's a lot of them close. You start with what's close and then you build on. If you don't want to build on, you want to do simple old-fashioned type of medicine like we're talking about, then you apply the 85-85 rule and you still got good medicine.
Sure.
Because the vast majority of people do well on it. But yeah, I do add back. I even do weird things. I actually add terpenes back to flowers, which nobody else does. And I developed a method of doing that I call I call it vapor deposition of the plant. And the reason is if you have a good dry plant with not a lot of water in it, then the cellulose cardboard is like cardboard. It'll even absorb things like terpenes. So I have all these flowers in this bag. I have a special little sponge up here with that terpene in there, and I let the vapors slowly infuse back in the plant matter.
Neat.
And after a while, I've learned how long to put it to get the approximate amount I want in there. And I'm done. Because if you've done a lot of water in the plant, the cellulose is more than happy to reabsorb those terpenes. Now, maybe I have a plant like Romulan that is just horrible. There's no terpenes in it. It just got THCA. By the way, it's a great plant if you want pure THCA.
That was one of the first plants I grew.
Yeah, if you want pure THC and nothing else, I tell you, grow Romulan. Then you can add back to it what you want. That way you're not having to clean the crap out first and then put back what you want, right? Just saying. So if you think it's awful strain. It's not an awful strain from a phytochemical agricultural standpoint. It's a very focused THCA and nothing but. Okay, anyway. So I will take Romulan and I'll say, wow, I'd have to first put in an alpha-pinene vapor thing, then a beta-carotene, then this and that. Forget that. Instead, I use hops essential oil that has all those in it. And I put that in the patch and let that vapor infuse, because now I get the gang in there. And then I put the gang in there and I say the problem is that the myrcene content that came from that oil is not enough. So now I only have to put one pure terpene in there instead of 10 or 20. That saved me a lot of time by starting with essential oil where most of it's already there, and I'm just doing the final addition of the one or two. So that cuts down on labor. Now, that is precisely the money-saving step that big corp will always use in doing these things. The bottom line is don't do foolish things that cost more money. So that is the technique they will use. I will most certainly use that to compete against them. You can use it in the boutique market to compete against them. Use the smart things that they said about don't waste money to keep the cost down. Now, in their case, they keep the cost down to maximize profit. We're doing things a little differently. We're making much more expensive medicine, sacrificing part of the profit to have these boutique things, right? When you buy wine from a boutique vineyard, so that 2011 and 2012 had slightly different pigment, slightly different nuanced flavor, which is exactly why you pay twice as much for it. They put a lot more energy in to do that than Gallo did. Okay, so that cost them a lot more, which is why that bottle cost you a lot more. Their profit margin isn't as big as Gallo's is. They don't care. They're in a boutique market that Gallo has no hope of competing in, and never will, because the mantra in Big Corp is biggest profit margin possible. Keep it cheap. So they have no hope of competing in this market. So in terms of mixing matching with flowers, that's something you can do. Same thing with the concentrates, right? Let me give you an example that's really ideal, a really ideal sweet one. Making vapor pens, okay? Well, all these knuckleheads are adding propylene glycol. Propylene glycol is not good in large concentrations. The FDA all suddenly went after the e-pen market for tobacco, for nicotine. They're going to hammer on them about that. They're going to get in trouble. The worst thing is the only reason they put propylene glycol in nicotine is because nicotine is an alkaloid. Alkaloids are like white sugar. You drop white sugar in a hot skillet, what happens? Does it turn into vapor? No, it burns. It destroys because it won't vaporize when you heat it up. Right, so alkaloids need some kind of vaporizing vehicle, carrier vehicle, to make them go into a gaseous stage. They use propylene glycol, which is a hydrated solution, has water in it. Micro drops of water explode in the system, literally explode, forcing that stuff to vaporize. That's how they get the alkaloid into a gaseous form. Now, let me ask you a question about terpenoids. If you drop terpenoid on a hot skillet, has it ever had a problem turning into a vapor?
That I know of.
No. What happens when you heat them up? They immediately evaporate on you. So you have to avoid heat, because the moment you add any heat, they want to turn into a gas on their own. They don't need a vaporizer. So putting in a vaporizer designed for alkaloids that's not healthy with terpenoids is going to get you in trouble when the FDA comes in. They're going to say, why did you use something knucklehead? The next thing people do is say, okay, well, I took your word on that, Kim, so I switched over. I'm putting grapeseed oil in there. And I say, wait a minute. Last month, 2 months ago, I taught you the proper way to de-wax, and now you're throwing wax back in there? Are you kidding me? You were trying to keep from destroying lungs, and now you're putting something in that destroys the lungs back? What are you thinking? And I say, you have a terpenoid mixture in a cartridge that's too darn thick because it came from CO2. It won't wick. What should you dilute that terpenoid mixture with? Another terpenoid. Right? So you add a little beta-caryophyllene, you add a little limonene, you add fir needle essential oil. And it doesn't take a lot. If it's viscous where it won't move at all, simply adding 5%. 5% is enough to make it runny like thick honey, and that's all you need.
So, in New Mexico, we have a cap of 70% THC on concentrates.
Which is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Well, that's
how the hell do you do that? I mean, if you
a lot of us are formulating letters to write to explain to New Mexico that they're going to be legally liable for forcing people to have bad practices in pharmaceutical compounding. We're trying to get you to make it as pure as possible to get out everything you don't want. If you've set an artificial cap of 70%, which is difficult to do because we want it between 70 and 80%, when you get it really good at it, where all the proper things are in there, then you have to start adding crap back in there we don't want, or you just have to start using pore extraction techniques that leave crap in there we don't want.
Or real crappy weed.
So, if the state of New Mexico is forcing you to use bad practices going to hurt people, somebody's going to get sued over that, including the state. Also, does a state legal regulator have a legal right to practice medicine without a medical degree or pharmaceutical degree to decide what medical efficacy is? The answer is no, right? They have their expert doctors that say you don't do that. Or pharmacists say you don't do that with medicine because there are times we need 0.5%, 10%, 50%, and in certain treatments we need it nearly pure.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, when we get ready to treat cancer, and you have to give 1,000 milligrams at a whack, you don't want to give them some absurd amount of stuff. You want to give them 1 milliliter that contains, well, actually it'll be 1.1 milliliter because the density is only 9, So 1.1 milliliters, it has exactly 1,000 milligrams in there, right? That's the proper way to do that. So if people other than professional medical people and scientific people want to take it upon themselves to start dictating things that only the FDA scientists and doctors can do, they get to take responsibility for it legally. So we're in the process of trying to put together a paper to point all this out and send it to them. Now, when I did something similar with problems in Colorado and Washington, my trick was I said, I don't want you to believe a single thing I say because you probably think I'm just a stoner hippie. And so I'm just trying to get something I want. So the person you need to talk to is your state lawyers whose job it is to keep you from being sued, including the governor. And by the way, once he signs off on that, he's liable. So I say, don't talk to me about that. I'm insisting you go to your lawyers, you have the conversation. 3 days later, Washington's like, holy smokes, you can't believe the conversation. I said, well, I warned you. You know, you have no right dictating that stuff. So in the case of Washington, what I told him is you had no right to set pesticide levels. Only the FDA gets to do that in the USDA. No other branch of the government anywhere has any authority whatsoever. It's locked to them and nobody else. So nobody in the state ever has a right. Nobody. Right? Nobody. I said, so if you're going to start setting levels and you go to court and you have to throw yourself on the mercy of the court when he says, do you have a legal right to do this like the FDA? Your only argument is, well, we realize that, and so to keep from trying to make a mistake, to at least try to do the right thing under the law, we came up with a restriction that was 10 or 100 times more restrictive than the FDA will do. I'm the one that recommended they do that. I'm the one that recommended you go to your lawyers and you ask them that. The lawyer said, well, that might help me a little bit when I go to court. At least they'll see we made an effort to be overly safe when we took this responsibility on ourselves by being extreme about it. So, that 70% thing I am not happy about.
Nobody
That's
is.
got to get changed for a lot of reasons because unfortunately, you know, it took the first 7 years to get the butane makers to go from 35 to 50% up into the 50 to 65% range in terms of getting out cuticle waxes and things I need them to do. We finally have them at the 70 to 80 or 65 to 80% range where I need them to be for clean stuff. And, you know, it took years of improvements to get there. So suddenly telling somebody to use, you know, so here's an analogy. Here's an analogy. So basically, if the state of New Mexico decides that they're going to order in restaurants to put up a sign in the bathroom saying, do not wash your hands before going out to handle food because we decide not to do it. They don't have authority to do that. And if they do that, they're legally liable. Right? Right. And their lawyers, this is not even on their radar because nobody's ever had to deal with this before. So until I bring it up, and the lawyers have a chance to think about it, because somebody has to bring it to their attention first, and then they freak.
So, okay, with all of that being said about the BHO, what about the solventless? What about the rosin?
Now, when you say solventless, what do you mean? Because this is a trick question on my part. When you say solventless, what do you mean?
Okay, rosin.
Okay, is that the only one you mean by that, or you also mean CO2?
Go with the rosin. Let's go.
Yeah, go with the rosin.
Let's go with rosin.
Yeah, let's go with rosin.
And the
That was a
reason,
little
the
leading.
reason is CO2 is a chemical.
Yes.
Right.
Therefore, is a chemical extraction.
Right.
No matter what anybody says, chemical extraction. Rosin is a physical and or mechanical extraction, like bubble hash.
Yes.
Like dry sitting keef.
Yes.
Okay? The ethanol extractions I do, BHO, even CO2, which is illegally a chemical, is a chemical extraction.
Sure.
Period. Well, no. Everybody wants to say, everybody with a CO2 unit wants to say we're not using solvents. Yes, you are. You most
You're just
definitely
not
using
using
solvents.
explosive
And the
solvent.
problem with the solvent that they're using is a lot of nasty growth regulation hormones love that solvent. So they come down in it. And you don't see it as bad in the butane. So yes, it is a chemical solvent, and yes, there are the related chemical solvent extraction problems that go with it. And so when they're in denial about that, they're setting themselves up for a fall.
So with the rosin, say, is that
Good and bad
what
with rosin.
all are we pulling out of it when you're
So because there's
pressing out
there's a
flowers?
huge amount of water in there, the first thing that happened is the water because the terpenoids hate the water, and because they're surrounded by water, there's more water in the plant than terpenoids, right? The plant is 80% water when it's fresh. that means the terpenoids have a tough time evaporating out of the plant because their ability to evaporate out is they're kind of behind water molecules and they can't get around them.
Okay.
So you have a richer terpene package because you preserve more using a rosin effect. That's one of the good sides. One of the downsides is when I look under the microscope, rosin has a lot of particulates in it. Little itty bits and pieces of crap because it was a physical, mechanical separation.
Correct.
However,
now are those
assuming that you're going to winterize that rosin to get out the cuticle waxes, and that means that you have it in a big solvent where it's very runny.
I've heard arguments about winterizing rosin.
Well, if you want to get sued for particles of mold in there when a person has impaired lungs, then you'll deal with that when the day comes. Or if you want to properly process it to get that crap out of there, you'll do it.
Well, no, I'm curious about this because I've heard people for and against.
So when you go to winterize it, it'll be in a solvent like ethanol or butane or whatever you're using, single solvent usually at -20 degrees, right? And so what's going to happen is before you evaporate off the solvent, you run that through a standard #1 filter paper, like everybody else does for everything, and suddenly you entirely cleaned up any particulate and it's gone, including bacteria gets filtered out, by the way, with #1 filter paper. It's great. It's just great, okay? Something as simple as a 2-minute filtration and you completely removed all the particulates, right?
Cool.
So, another thing, by the way, when filtration with filter paper, coffee filters don't work well enough. And the quantitative stuff that's like a 0.45 micron is an absurd overkill that horribly slows down filtering time. All you need, it turns out that in the herbal, terpenoid, pharmaceutical processing world, the one and only filter paper you'll ever need for every single thing you do is a #1 filter paper. So that's all you have to buy. So that's not a brain concern about which filter paper do I need to use here. And you only ever use one piece. More is never better with filter paper. More is never better with most things. It was engineered for one piece of filter paper to extraordinarily effectively clean up all that physical crap.
So again, a rosin as opposed to a BHO or a closed loop type of BHO. What is? I mean,
Well, I'm trying to tell you all the differences.
Okay, you said that the terpene is better.
So you want to winterize to get rid of the cuticle waxes. In the process, because you're going to filter it as a standard procedure, you arbitrarily remove all the particulates. Now you have something similar to a BHO or a CO2 or an ethanol, but unlike the CO2 or butane, it has an extremely robust terpene package. Okay, there you go. Now you have some water trapped in there, so you have to get rid of that as well. But guess what else came out in the winterizing because at -20 water's not happy, right? So that got caught up in the lipid oils. The ice crystals got caught up in that, right? And they're gone. Okay, not a problem. I use nothing but ethanol. I've been using it since I was 7.5 years old. I've been extracting terpenoid medicine since then. I get everything out. I literally get everything out. My extraction is never less than 98+%. I get everything out. That's good and bad because my cleanup is awful compared to yours. I get out every bit of cuticle. I'm good at it. I get every bit of chlorophyll. I'm good at it. I get all the sterols and sugars and plant acids. I'm good at it. And then I have to remove them because ethanol is really good extracted when you develop your method correctly.
Yes.
So you make sure you guarantee you get every bit of everything out, and then you make sure you have a heck of a cleanup. So, and the reason that works is because it's a liquid chemical extraction. Now, when you have a gas chemical extraction, that's butane and CO2. They're both gas chemical extractions. When you're removing your extraction solvent, the way you do it is by returning it to baseline pressure so it can turn back into a gas and leave, boil off. Problem with your solvent boiling off is anything that has a high vapor pressure or a low vapor or whatever. High vapor pressure, like the monoterpenes, they boil off with it. They get carried right out with it and you lose them. Unless you find a way to trap them downline, that's more complicated. There are ways to do it. I teach people to do it. It's true, but most people don't do it because of work, equipment. So suddenly what I'm finding on average with BHO is that whatever the average terpene package in the natural plant is, and what I get in ethanol, they get between 1/5 and 1/10 of that amount back. So they have a loss of 80 to 90%. Okay? That I don't get, that you don't get. Okay? That means that some of this stuff, depending on which terpenes they lost, no longer is very functional as medicine. It looks like the sort of stuff GW produces. It looks more like an allopathic pharmaceutical. And so, for every one of those concentrates, I have to teach them how to add in these other essential oils to rebuild it up, or individual terpenes, in order to make it work properly. So that's some of that as a comparison. I want to bring up the E-pen thing, and here's why. It only takes about, like I said, it only takes about a 5% addition of something runny to make that heavily viscous stuff runny enough to wick. That's all you need. More than that, it gets sloppy. Also, terpenes are potently flavored. You go putting 50% terpenes, people are getting really tired of citrus flavor so fast, you know, because it's just way too potent, right? So about 5% is all you need normally. This is what I tell people, it's interesting. If I look at a wide variety of essential oils, no matter which one I pick, it's going to have a minimum of 12 terpenes that it shares in common with cannabis essential oil.
Okay.
And if I take that same essential oil and I compare it to chamomile or rosemary, it's probably true. And if I take the rosemary and compare it to oregano, probably true. So they all share all these terpenoids in common, which means this is why you can use these other essential oils to build these things back up. So now we have like CO2 concentrate. This stuff is always a thick mass. Always a thick mass, unlike some BHO that can be slightly more runny, right? You have to scrape it out with a spatula from the container, always, right? It has to be watered down. So what I'm telling them is things like for the E-pen, right? So you could go, even though, so you can buy individual terpenes that are food and drug grade, and of course, everywhere you work, it has to be food and drug grade, unless it's not possible to get it. It's not possible to get it, butane, it doesn't exist. So if you go to a company like Advanced Bio, adv-bio.com, they are, all they do is sell approximately 2,000 compounds that are approved by the FDA for the food industry for flavoring. It includes all the terpenoids, all the alkaloids, all the glycosides, all the flavonoids. They have an entire list, and they sell them. And they're all food and drug grade. Wow. So you click on their Beta Mercy, and make sure when you do that you look at all the paperwork underneath that listed. If they have a kosher document, you want to is a kosher certificate, you want to download it. The certificate analysis, absolutely. Sure. Right? If they have an organic certificate. So every time you buy these, please make sure if it's certified as it, that you download those and add those to your record as the type of drug you're adding, right? Sure. So that's about great for individual terpenes, okay? Now, if you want mixtures of essential oils, none of them are made to be edible. These are all essential oils, like cannabis, right? They weren't specifically food and drug grade, right? But we know they're pretty harmless if they're terpenoid. So what you do is you want to use, because it wasn't specifically acquired in a food and drug grade protocol, you want to go to steam distills. So you go to a place like Eden Botanicals, and you look at their steam distilled essential oils. Why? Because they only use water. The beauty of that, a lot of the big chunky molecules can't go into water, right? They can't vaporize into water, so they don't go over. So the steam distilled. Remember that the finest fraction, the special sweet fraction from a steam distill, the part they call hydrosol, that's the absolute lightweight, most finest, most aromatic terpenes in there that sell for a phenomenal amount of money in making perfume. Okay? That's all part of the steam distill. So you buy the steam distilled essential oils, not the CO2s. The reason is the CO2 loves to pull down pesticides, right? It loves to pull down growth hormones. So I wouldn't want to use the CO2s they have.
Again, that's the Reverend Dr. Kymron DeCesare, who was here. He's from Steep Hill Labs. He was here in New Mexico a few months ago talking to some of the LNPPs. I want to thank, again, Tim and Organtica for that clip. We'll be right back after this.
medical marijuana. The medical marijuana radio, radio show.
So at the top of the show, I told you about my experience running into Governor Martinez here in New Mexico. She did say she understood the oil and that she had known someone in hospice that needed that, and I let her know that I had a friend in hospice, and I tried to get them expedited into the program, and I was told that there was no way to do it, and it took 29 days. Well, unfortunately, my friend passed away last weekend. Did not get into the program in time. She did have the card for a little while, but rest in peace, JB. I want to thank my two radio mentors, both with the initials HS. Thank you for your inspiration. If you'd like to be a guest on this show, if you have a product, if you have a website, you're an activist, anything cannabis related, it's info@mmjradio.com, info@mmjradio.com. If you'd like to hear some old shows, it's mmjradio.com. My YouTube channel is LSLove88. SoundCloud, it's MMJ Radio. Spreaker, it's MMJ Radio. Also on Spreaker, it's timeforhemp.com. iHeartRadio, Time for Hemp. On Now TV, channel 937. Also heard on 420radio.org. Fuck Trump.
Bapu buye da, suye da bo, bapu dini, sa bapu bapu.